Oh, hello everyone. It's Zara Altair with Actation Now, and you are at the Midweek Zap. And today our guest is the best kept secret on the internet, Mark Pierce. He is a security specialist, and he's going to talk today about security for your website. It's so important for all of us. And boy, I have learned so much just talking with Mark. Um, Mark, you want to say hello to everyone? And
Absolutely. Thank,
okay. So, Mark, I'm going to start with the very first question I asked you, and that is, so why do I need security for my WordPress site? I thought WordPress did this for me.
well, you know, if you think about security, yes, it'll do basic protection. For instance, if you log into it as a password interface, it has a dashboard that you do all your updates and you can install and work with your site. So they protect the back end pretty much. But as far as the real attacks that are coming or from around the world, actually, from they're called botnets or bots or humans. If you think about that level of protection, that's where the hacker or the ones who want to harm your site are coming from. They're not really what's built into WordPress. Let's just put it that way, is not good enough for the complexity and how these hackers think and what they're trying to accomplish.
And um, so the robust, as it were, security that's built into WordPress is very limited. Is that what I'm understanding? So we need to think about more security.
Absolutely, it's limited only because the popularity of WordPress has now become kind of like Microsoft became after they got popular. You become a target. So think of it like this. If you're using a very popular, there's millions of WordPress sites out there. You know, the hackers' mentality is they want to damage the most amount of people with the least amount of effort. So what they do is they're always going to target a WordPress site based on, number one, popularity. But one of the things that I always tell folks is, if you watch, I have a 9-video WordPress security tips series that's available, and I put it here in the stream on the events page for those who want to take a look at it. Is those 9 basic points that I touch on, I consider that the very basic steps we should be taking to protect ourselves. So think of WordPress as being super popular, therefore more eyes are on a site. They're going to target large corporations and businesses, schools, federal government, so forth, but they're also now, and I found this out, targeting the little guy like me. And I always wondered why. So as I was preparing my site with what's called a WordPress, um, it's a firewall. You should have a firewall up, and they're free. But a lot of folks either don't know how to install them, configure them right, or don't know or keep on top of monitoring the traffic that's coming to their site and isolating the source of the target, the people who are actually attacking you. I'll never understand the mentality of hackers, but from what I've learned is, while I was actually in December 2013 is when I finally got hacked big time. I got hacked on not only one of my sites, but I had 3 of them hacked. And I'll share later if you'd like to know what my flaw was. But the idea was, I was just now putting my firewall up, which is an application firewall that runs inside of the WordPress installation on your hosting account. That's where it actually runs. They can also run from other sites, but we're going to keep it nice and simple and easy to understand today, and kind of understand what basic steps that we need to take to protect our sites.
That was my next question. Wow, you're just thinking ahead of me. So, what's the most important action that we, as non-technical people who just want to put our content on a WordPress site and, you know, invite people in, what is the most important action we can take? Actually, I think you told me before the other day when we had our first in real life meeting, because we live fairly close to each other, that there were 2 steps we need to take.
Well, by the way, it was really a pleasure to meet you. You're the first person I've ever met in person on Google Plus, so it was a real pleasure. It was awesome. We had coffee together. Um,
Yes, we did. We had such a I was just felt the same way. I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody I met on Google Plus and we're meeting in real life. It was just a fabulous conversation and a great meeting. I highly encourage everyone to do it if there's somebody near you to have a real life conversation. Anyway, back to what are those two important steps to take care of my site?
okay, well, some folks in our who's watching today may already know this, but there's a lot of folks or standard users that are running their business, and either they A, pay somebody else to maintain their site, or B, they just don't have time. Okay, so first of all, I like to say make time for your WordPress security, because you will heavily regret it if you don't have some form of protection up, okay? So with that said, I don't use scare tactics, I use facts, okay? If I tell you I've been hacked and here's what I learned, you're gonna listen maybe, I don't know. But you do have to take action. So first of all, there's so much stuff out on the internet. What do we do? Okay, well, a lot of us have already heard and may already know this. The first thing is if all of your plugins, WordPress itself, and your themes must be updated on a regular basis. I mean right away. Because what's happening is this is why WordPress finally changed their and added what's called automatic updates to WordPress, because they know that is their latest security step, by the way. Now, they're taking others behind the scenes. We won't talk about that today. But you would not believe how many folks just forget to do it. And you know what's so interesting? When you first log into WordPress, your dashboard will tell you you have this many updates. Please pay attention. Now, if you don't know what you're doing or you're a little confused, take your time, research. But one thing, please have a backup plan in place. We'll talk about backups later. You also have to know how to restore your site in case it does break, because I guarantee you your hosting company, they only back up once a month. So if you update your site every week all the way up to just before they back yours up and you're hacked, guess what happens? You lose everything. I've already been through this. Don't let it go that far. So the number one thing I recommend everybody make sure that their WordPress version is always up to date. Don't wait a month to log in and find out it's been 28 days since it last updated. Sign up for updates, something where you will know that your WordPress site. So make sure your WordPress version is updated. All your plugins are also current and updated. And by the way, the last thing is make sure your theme is updated. Now, I'm going to throw out a number that's going to blow your mind, and I researched this number. 73% of all plugins available on WordPress have hacker or malware embedded into the code. So the average user like you and I do not know it's even there. Now that shocked me, because I thought, well, don't they have a way to make sure they don't have hacker code? Well, it gets complicated, and I don't want to get into that right now, but basically it is so complex, even the developers have problems finding this code. With that said, the other thing you can do, number two, if you ever use a plugin, this is why I brought that number up. Make sure that you do your homework. Research who the developer who made the plugin. Find out if there's been any malware in that particular plugin, because if the number says 73%, to me that is out of control and something needs to be done. Now WordPress, they're not going to tell everybody this. They do have a way to scan their stuff, but just so you know, this stuff is so well embedded in the code, source code itself, the average user like you and I are not going to see that. So be aware. WordPress needs to be updated. Number two, plugins updated, and plugins, you need to find out who your plugin was developed by. Be very careful, because I have found that even some of the most popular plugins that everybody's using today has source code in it that actually is considered like a form of malware. And what they do is they get into what's called your SQL or SQL database, what's called SQL injection. This is all done through your plugin. You don't even know what's happening. The number 3 point that I'd like to bring up, and it's my first video in the series, by the way, is make sure that people think security starts on your website or your blog. It absolutely does. But guess where it starts prior to that? It starts on your local computer. I have a couple videos that talks about this, how malware gets into your system, you don't even know it's there. What happens is the hacker will hijack your computer and your internet connection and use your own computer to attack other sites. This is happening right now. So be aware that you need some really quality anti-malware on your local computer system, and make sure it's being scanned weekly. And so if you watch a couple of the videos that I made, I'll go into great detail about this, but how it works basically is a lot of folks don't think they could be hijacked. I found out that I had a piece of malware on my computer. It didn't harm my business or anything, but what it was doing was hijacking my internet connection and using my computer, the internet connection, and they were stealing my connection from me. So just be aware, those are your top issues. There's a long, long list though, Zara, but that's just to get you started.
Mark, I want to just go back for a minute to plugins, because so many people use plugins, especially people who are doing any kind of marketing, which is almost everybody here on Google Plus is looking for ways to monetize, and that their WordPress site is part of that plan. And there's so many plugins that seem useful to people, and it's totally frightening to know that, you know, they have malware embedded inside, you know, because here's this handy dandy plugin that does whatever, you know, that helps you manage your email list or whatever it might be. And so here we are, and we're busy marketing, and we're busy engaging with people on Google Plus, and we want these plugins to do what they claim they're going to do on our website. Can you just kind of point by point walk us through how to check your plugins?
Sure.
I think that would be really helpful, because when you do install a plugin, you can go to the site. There's always an access to the developer and whatever. But if you're thinking about getting a plugin, how do you do that? I mean, you know, this is what I call my blonde question. You know, how do I really do this, Mark? You know.
That's a really great question, because I would ask the same thing. So you're telling me that 73%, which is way too much, way too high, of these plugins may or may not have malware. Most people, you won't even know it, okay? All right, so here's where you start. You always start by putting that, I call it my blonde hat because I'm a blonde too, right? Is make sure that you go out and research the actual, the name of the developer who created, not the company, the developer. Sometimes it's somebody else. So you go with the company developer first and do a Google search. Just type in their names, comma, malware, and the name of the plugin. That's the first step. And I call that just your basic forensics, okay? That'll tell you right away if there's a red flag, number one. Number two, you must stay abreast or updated on the latest malware attacks and how and what they're attacking. But for instance, they do make a malware theme malware checker, so you can actually install that plugin, and it'll actually scan and tell you which or where the code could be coming from, and it'll also tell you what plugin or theme it's originated from. Now, that most people don't really think about this. Now, I don't use one of those. I use one much deeper. I actually use a plugin that is actually removes the malware directly from my site. Not only does it, I can scan my site, but I can also remove. Sometimes it can break your site, so I don't recommend the average user to use this, by the way, so I'm not going to tell you the name of it today. It's not needed. So I think where you want to start is those two steps. Just go through the developer, the person who's selling it, so the one who's distributing the plugin, do some search, find out if there's a red flag, and then number two, I don't particularly use them, but you can install a plugin that will actually tell you, it'll scan all your install and tell you what's going on. But the average user's not going to do this. Mm-hmm. So I think it needs to be handled, believe it or not, in my own opinion, and by the way, this is a disclaimer, don't blame me if things break. But quite honestly, I'm confused, and I'd like an answer directly from WordPress. Why are these complex malware embedded plugins all over your site? Because and they want to protect us. So it's not really directly their fault, because you got to remember they're probably using a basic malware scanner and it's coming up clean. Remember how I said how it's very complex coding that even the malware or the experts are having problems reading? So you can't blame them for everything, but I'd like to see them step up their game just a little more on security. So if you're scanning your site for malware, there's some free tools. You can go out. Securi and a few other companies. I have one on my site, by the way, where they actually scan my site for me remotely, but I do have to pay for that service. Now, most people don't want to pay for it, but I do because I feel it's important. So keeping it simple, those are just the preliminary thought processes that goes behind what's happening.
Oh, I think that leads right into, first I want to thank our audience for being here. You guys are awesome. Cheryl Deuce has a question for you. She says, it sounds easier to just take your computer to a guy once a month. So much to know and stay on top of. Do you think that that is a solution, taking your computer to a guy?
That's really up to you. I personally do not think so. I think that now I'm going to go ahead and give myself a plug because I'm the guy you would come to. But let's assume you don't want to hire somebody. Well, if you take it to your computer guy, he will find your malware locally. I can give you free tools. I have them available on my site that I provide for you that you can use today. So go to my site. I have a resource page, and there's two resources I use. I use Malwarebytes, and these are free tools, by the way, that scans your local installation, and MZSoft. So I would say we have enough tools available to us. We just need to access and be aware what those tools are, where to go, and you can do this safely. Now, if, for instance, you did get embedded, and now it'll remove it, but it can also, when you remove local malware, it can cripple your operating system, so you have to be aware of the implications if you do scan your computer. So I think that's a comparable goal. If it's out of control and you can't isolate it yourself, yes, indeed, please take it to your local computer shop, of course. But I think it can be handled right now, today, via the internet, just by using tools that not only I provide, but a lot of sites provide for their end users. This is why I'm very passionate about security. And if you haven't noticed it, and you go to my site, you'll see a lot of free stuff and tools for you. Not only do I try to educate and share what I understand about WordPress security, but I'm providing these tools to you free of charge. So please utilize those tools, and that is an idea. But I understand folks don't want to stay on top of it, so when you do trust or you use a security specialist, and I call myself a security consultant, a specialist maybe, but I'll let Azara call me a specialist. That was really very nice of you. Thank you so much. But with that said, you make sure that you also check out who's working on your system. Find out if these people or that person has a good track record and that they're honest and you can trust them. I actually give away free 20-minute consultation calls. So if you wanted me to consult with you, you can easily go to my support page. I'll do a video call live, share your screen, and I'll tell you anything you want to know. Okay? So there are people who will help you, get started with your security plan.
That's great. I know I've had a working relationship with my tech for over 10 years now, and it's really great to develop that relationship. On the other hand, I try to do as much as possible because, gosh, every time I consult with my tech consultant, money is flowing out of my pocket. So I try to do as much as I can myself, especially when it comes to troubleshooting. I just want to bring this up once again from Cheryl Deuce. A nice thanks, Mark Pierce. I have 8 kids and my computers always have crap on them. Cheryl, I love you. You are so great. And I want to thank David Leopold and Luc Chalois and Phil Boyer and Carrie G. Butler, everybody for being here today and joining us. So I have one more question for you, Mark, and that is, say I personally have Malwarebytes on my computer, but I want to double check something because it's sounding like it can check on my computer what's going on, but it is not going to check those 73% infected plugins on my WordPress site. Is that correct?
That's correct. But it's important. I'm glad you got that. We have a two-step process. Always start number one, and this is my first video in my security series. Start locally first. Get all your malware. Make sure you're clean, because if they have a keylogger installed, and if you don't know what a keylogger is, let me tell you something. If it's on your system, you're in big trouble because they're logging your keystrokes directly so they can hack your bank account records based on when you log into your site, your bank account. Be careful. Number two, yes, you're right. So this is why what I provide is I provide the security services. I have a lockdown package, and I'm surprised I didn't have more takers on Google+. So what I did is I threw out my lockdown package, and what I do is I go in and lock down certain areas of your WordPress site, but it's done a little more complicated. I don't recommend people using the tactics that I use, but I can share the plugins that'll help you as well. I go into your htaccess file. Do not touch this file unless you know what you're doing. It'll completely wipe out your site if you put the wrong code in it. So I always make sure if you're touching this, if you don't know what you're doing, contact myself and I'll help you through it. You're right. So you always want to start with a remote scan for free. Always take advantage of free scans. Of course, the companies that do this, like security, they're going to want they want your business, so they're going to give you a free scan. Well, the problem is if you're embedded, now they're going to go ahead and make money, which they should because they're a business. If you do have malware, you're going to have to pay somebody to get rid of it. I want to warn everybody, be careful about this because they'll charge up to $300 per session or site removal. That's way too much. I understand it's a complicated job, but that's a lot of money. So you want to make sure that you have a web-based or locally installed malware scanner. I have it on all my backup software. So whoever I deal with, I install my backup software, and with that installation, I scan your site for free every week. And once it isolates the problem, if I can't remove it, at least I can report it that it's there. So you need to be very aware of what's available for free, and make sure that if you've never had your site scanned, at least find out, get you a free scan done right away.
That's a terrific service. That's a terrific service. We need to pay so much attention to this. We were talking in the green room about how people have all this avoidance behavior around taking care of themselves, and was talking about, when I was in the financial industry, and I suggest that people get their will done, and I lived in California at the time, and all they had to do was write on a piece of paper what they wanted, date it, and sign it, and their will was legal until they got to a lawyer, and people didn't do it. And Mark's experience is that the same thing happens when people think about security on their website or even with their computer. But Mark, we have a question here from Phil Boyer. Can Mark address the use of, quote, admin, unquote, for the username?
That's a super question, Phil, and thank you for asking that. That's also my number 9 video in my security tips series, and very, very good. And now, in the older installation of WordPress, what would happen is WordPress, this is previous to today because I just built a site yesterday on a subdomain for our community called Everything WordPress. We'll talk about that later. Here's what you do not want to do. If you have an older installation of WordPress, I'm going to condense it down because I see we're getting close to the end of the show today. Yeah. Okay. You never want to use the word admin ever. And what happens and how it originally gets there, okay, is back in the older versions of WordPress, WordPress automatically would put the word admin in, and you'd put a password in, and you wouldn't think about it, move on, next you know, all the hackers and the bots that are attacking our sites through what's called a DOS, denial of service attack, and I'll explain this a little later, or we can touch on it another time. This is the most common attack against WordPress sites that brings us down, basically. So what happens is, if you use the word admin, they're checking that against, and they're using a bot. So what they do is they know if they've already got 50% of the hack completed, because now they know your login name is admin. Not a good idea. And then all they have to do is crack your password and they're in. So never use the word admin. This is something you should always avoid. If you currently have admin, I have a video and a post on my site that will teach you step by step how to change your admin account and assign another admin user under a different name, and never use your name, your site name, or anybody in your family's name for your login name. So that's why you don't want to use admin. It's really not a good idea.
Great question, Phil. Thanks a lot. I'm learning so much today, and I'm hoping the rest of you are learning a lot. And we just have a few minutes left. So Mark has a wonderful Google Plus community called Everything WordPress. So I know you can access some of this information in his community. So Mark, tell us a little bit about your community and why you started it.
Okay, well, thanks. That's a great question. And by the way, it is a private community, invite only. So if you want to join and I don't send you an invite, just go to the page and ask to join. I do check out all members prior to bringing them in, and we don't focus on development and complex ideas. The reason I started it is because I felt there needed to be a fresh, different view and perspective on helping the average user with their WordPress sites. Well, if I made it public, it would just be another link dropping spam network like a lot of them are, and you know, I just got the wrong perspective. I wanted a private, smaller community so I can help and all of the users can engage and find resources that are going to tell you the truth without trying to sell you something. And I felt very strongly and passionate about this. So not only do we talk about everything WordPress, from plugins, themes, we have a security category. I am the security guy, so if anybody needs help with that, I'm willing to help out. And also, I encourage other users, which a lot of communities don't do this, to share what they actually do without, you know, trying to sell their services. I mean, I know a lot of communities frown on what they call self-promotion. I take a different perspective on this. I think that it could work, but it has to be strict guidelines used. So I do allow a little bit of self-promotion, and the reason why is, how else are you going to tell people that you can do something if you don't share what you do? That doesn't make sense to me. But then if you share too much, you become what they call a spammer. So that's my perspective. It's working quite well. I think we're only at 74 members, but that's 74 more than I had at day one. And Zara can share with you, as well as anybody else who joins, it's a spectacular environment. There's a lot of folks that share a lot of information there. So if you haven't taken a look, go to just type in Everything WordPress. My logo is not a WordPress logo. And you'll wonder why I did that as well. I have a reason for everything I do. Because, once again, I'm not trying to be like everybody else. I'm trying to be genuine to my message, genuine to the end users, and be understanding and fair with everybody. So I don't use WordPress as a logo.
Super. It's really been wonderful having you here today. You have so much information. It just comes off the top of your head. It's just astounding. I'm sure we're going to have you back on the Midweek Zap, and we can talk some more and focus on backing up, because that's another part of taking care of your security. And I want to thank all of the audience for being here with us today. You've been great. Love the questions. If you have any more questions for Mark, be sure to leave them in the comment stream after we leave. One more thing, next week Denise Wakeman is going to be our guest, so we're going to be talking a lot about engaging, so hope you can join us and engage. So Mark, here we are at the end of the show, so give us some last words of wisdom.
Thank you for having me. If anybody hasn't learned enough or they want more information, I do offer a 9-video course on WordPress security free of charge. The link is on the events page. Please utilize this information. Contact me anytime. I'd be more than happy to help out. Thanks.
Okay, so everyone, thanks so much for being here, and please take advantage of what Mark has to offer and protect yourself. I think you'll be happy in the long run that you did. So we're going to say bye for now, and we'll see you next week. Mark, say bye-bye.
See ya.
Okay, thanks everyone.